Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Chamber's Transportation First event featuring Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation Monica Tibbits-Nutt and MBTA General Manager Phil Eng. I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and we're very pleased to have a nearly full room. We've got some people still arriving and about 200 more people that are joining us virtually for this conversation. And I thought I'd start by giving a little background on the why of all of this. At the Chamber, we continue to serve as the leading convener of the region's business community on issues that are important to our purpose of making this region the best place for all businesses and all people to succeed. And our Transportation First series that we're launching today is one of the innovative ways that we're convening government business leaders to have public dialogues aimed at us moving forward on strategies and solutions that enable us to create the mobility network that we want and that we deserve. This we know will take time and resources, and we accept that. It didn't take us a day to get here. It took us a while to get here, so it'll take us a while to get out of it, but we're in it for the long haul. And we intend to continue to assemble and have dialogue about this issue. We urgently need to create a world-class transportation system, one that is safe, reliable, and meets the needs of the 21st century economy. And this requires policymakers, employers, and residents to recognize first that public transportation is a public good. So why do we call this Transportation First? There are several interrelated and critical public policies on government's agenda and certainly on the Chamber's agenda. But we would assert that by putting transportation first, the Commonwealth will be in a better position to solve those other public policy issues, which are the common barriers to the region's growth and prosperity, including housing. If you care about housing, you care about transportation. Economic mobility, climate. If you care about climate, you care about transportation. Economic development, education, and healthcare access. If you care about access and opportunity, you care about transportation. As I said, this event marks the beginning of a series of events that we will host throughout 2025, including an event featuring Rich Davey on the state of the airport, and Chief Joshua Franklin Hodge from the city of Boston on the state of downtown mobility. And we'll have several others throughout the year as well. Before we begin, I want to thank our event series sponsor, State Street, and give a special thank you to Ron O'Hanley, the CEO of State Street and the former chair of the Chamber Board of Directors, for his continued leadership on transportation policy. Ron has really stepped up as a leading voice of the business community on the need for efforts like this. With State Street's important partnership, we'll be able to make these events free and open to the public. So, to launch today's event in this series, I'm pleased to have two people in government that are leading the way on creating that future of mobility that we all aspire to. I'm pleased to introduce Secretary Monica Tibbits-Nutt and General Manager Phil Eng. Secretary Tibbits-Nutt of the Department of Transportation is responsible for 4 divisions of MassDOT: Highway, Rail, and Transit, the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and Aeronautics. She serves on the Mass Board. Oh, did we pay the bill? Okay. Get away from the light switches. Secretary Tibbits-Nutt serves on the Mass Board and the MBTA Board of Directors. And with all that accomplishment, I know that Monica is most proud of her recognition several years ago as one of the Chamber's 10 outstanding young leaders. And General Manager Phil Eng of the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority is a civil engineer with nearly 40 years of transportation experience, including president of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or MTA, Long Island Railroad, and interim president of New York City Transit. Phil brings his abilities to spearhead challenging initiatives, modernize aging systems, and prioritize safety to bear on this role at the MBTA. So the way we'll do this is that the secretary will make some remarks, the general manager will make some remarks, and then we'll have a conversation. So with that, I welcome Secretary Monica Tibbits-Nutt to the podium. Secretary?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for having me here today. I feel like most of you know about transportation, so I'm kind of like, I'll just cut out this section, but I'll give you kind of the highlights. This Transportation First initiative, I think, really hits on how important transportation is to Massachusetts. Every day we're reading in the paper about why people are leaving, the struggles around housing, and the struggles with, our economic development, and transportation is very central to a lot of that. This Healy Driscoll administration has talked from the very beginning about one transportation and also one government. And I think in that really signal that economic development, transportation, and housing are intrinsically linked and are really the key for making sure that not only the people that live here have a quality of life, but that the people who are thinking about, especially after school, moving somewhere else, that they are able to actually stay here and able to actually raise a family here, and for our seniors to be able to stay in the communities that they've lived in. MassDOT is very large, and what a lot of people don't realize, we are also very young. We are only 15 years old. Yeah, I mean, most of you were here back in 2009, we were kind of going through all of this shake-up, but this year's our 15th anniversary. I think it's actually on November 1st. So yes, very much so coming forward. We didn't want to miss an opportunity to use kind of this anniversary as an opportunity to not only talk about the work we're doing, but to also talk about the future of the work that we're going to do. So MassDOT at 15 really is built under 3 items. Beyond Mobility, which is our long-range plan, the Transportation Funding Task Force, and the strategic plan for DOT. Beyond Mobility really is looking at what is transportation going to look like in 2050. This is across all modes. So this isn't just looking at transit, this is looking at our highways, this is looking at the air, looking at the water, looking at our roadways, and really trying to understand what this system is going to need to be. I think we often talk about what's going on right now. We often talk about our frustrations now. But for us, it's important to not only deal with those, but to then look forward. Because when we talk about making Massachusetts the type of place that our residents deserve, these are the types of decisions we need to be making now. These are the types of plans that we need to be putting together now. So as part of Beyond Mobility, there are 6 key areas: safety, destination connectivity, travel experience, reliability, resiliency, and clean transportation. There are over 100 action items as part of this plan. This plan went out to public comment for, I think, around 60 days. We got thousands of comments, and we got them in many different forms. We got them via email, we got letters, we had people coming to our board meetings, we had people coming to public meetings, participating virtually. And I think that really illustrated how important this was to people. And after all of that, the team put together all of those comments and then put together this report. I highly suggest you take a look at it. I think it's 367 pages long, but it's a really good executive summary, so you can just hit the highlights on it. But it really is going to show you not just where we need to go, but also how we're going to get there as far as investments and policy decisions that we need to start making now. Transportation Funding Task Force. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I feel like this room is either on the task force or knows everything that we are doing on the task force. But the big thing now is the report is due December 31st. And this is looking at every possible revenue option that we can use to fund transportation. The administration was very clear: dig deep. And the way the task force was put together is looking at every single sector that needed to be involved with this. We're lucky to have Jim serve on this, and we have business groups across the Commonwealth. We have rural communities represented, our regional transit authorities. We have public transit experts, private transit experts. We have people who are dealing with housing shortages, people that work in the clean transportation sector. We wanted to make sure that if we were going to go through this exercise, which is very, very difficult, that we weren't going to leave someone out. We've seen many different efforts around transportation, around funding transportation, on improving transportation. Many of you have been involved in a lot of these groups, which have all done amazing work. But this question about, okay, even if this is going to be a difficult thing to do, the governor wants to know everything. The lieutenant governor wants to know everything and wants to know how they can work with the legislature, with their local officials to finally do the best we can to start addressing not just our shortfalls now, but also being able to fund the future of our transportation system. The report is going to come out on December 31st. We have had 12 meetings so far, hours and hours of focus groups. This team and this group has gone deep on this. We are looking forward to releasing the report. I hope it's not gonna be as long as the Beyond Mobility, but also there will be an executive summary, so we'll hit the highlights. The third part of MassDOT at 15 is our strategic business plan. This is really getting a better understanding of what the Department of Transportation needs to actually deliver on Beyond Mobility. So it's, who are we? After 15 years, what are we about? How do we need to be structured, and how are we going to pay for it? As I said, MassDOT is a relatively large agency. We are really unusual as far as the Department of Transportation in that we have the Registry of Motor Vehicles fall under us. So we touch every resident in some way. That is very complex, and when we were originally formed, there is no way that anyone thought about what we would look like 15 years from now. And now it really is spending the next 12 months, putting together what we need to look like, and then from there, starting to reorganize, reinvest in MassDOT. Housing. I often say that housing has a transportation problem, and transportation has a housing problem. Secretary Augustus and I spent a lot of time trying to make each other feel better about the choices we've made, and trying to work together to scour how in the world do we address this. $5.16 billion this administration has put towards addressing housing and building 65,000 units over the next 5 years. You also have the MBTA Communities Act. 83 of those communities have submitted those plans and have had them approved. The rest of them are working on these plans. But it really is illustrating in the difficulty for a lot of these communities to put together these plans, how hard it is to actually address this. And I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about affordable housing, and that if we just build affordable housing, everything will be fixed. I had a professor when I was in graduate school who, absolutely brilliant, really wanted me to stay a housing planner. I got out of that line of work and then picked transportation. And one of the things that she said to me, I ran into her at a forum at the Brookings Institute where I was actually talking about economics and I was talking about transportation. She came up to me and she was like, you know, spent a lot of time talking about affordable housing. I thought I raised you better than that. She's like, can you talk about the full spectrum of housing? And I'm not gonna pass, and I say full spectrum, but I'm not gonna pass it off, so I am actually gonna give the attribution. But the thing that she was trying to get at is affordable housing is fantastic, and it is really important from an equity standpoint that we take care of our most vulnerable residents. But if you don't have a full spectrum, for anyone that is not going to qualify for that housing, you are leaving them out. And it really is, we've got the expensive housing, we've got that covered. We're struggling with the affordable housing, and we're struggling even more with that middle ground. And if we can't get that full spectrum, you do make it impossible for every resident to be able to stay here. Because it is not possible for a lot of people to qualify for affordable, and it is really out of the range of possibility for a lot of people to afford on the higher end. So it is important to continue to focus across the board and making sure that we are supporting communities so that they can build these housing units. Everything is ultimately local. I spend a lot of time out in the community. I spend a lot of time in my car in congested traffic to be able to get to places like Western Massachusetts, to be able to get to places like the South Shore. And I think that really illustrates many of these communities are cut off. And when we go out there, whether you're in Franklin County dealing with their culvert issues, or a dirt road of theirs is washed out for the 4th time in 2 years, Whether we're down on the South Shore talking about sea level rise and the fact that their roads are flooding and they can't get out in these situations. Understanding that every single municipality, all 351 are different in some way. Local knowledge is the only way that we can build good transportation. Chapter 90 is one of the best ways that we can actually do that. Chapter 90, yeah, I'm looking at you guys, you know. I felt you be like, please help us out here. Chapter 90 is a fantastic tool that is incredibly difficult for communities to actually get. Having a lieutenant governor that is a former mayor brings a level of insight that I don't think that we've had before, especially when it comes to Chapter 90. We want to make it as easy as possible for communities to get the money. And the big focus on that is letting these communities tell us what they need. We are not in a position to dictate what a community needs. I can't say what any community needs. I may think about some things, we may have data that might point to some things, but it doesn't mean that we are right. And so for us, it's making it as easy as possible for these communities to access those funds. One of the big things that we built is Grant Central. This is us kind of coming into the modern age, using AI, making it to where communities just sign up, you get your Grant Central account, you go in, and all you have to do is type in whatever thing you need. It's just like, oh, I need a fire engine. And then the system is just going to tell you, here is every grant that you could get that would buy you a fire engine. And then you can track it. You will actually be able to see, here's where your application is. You don't have to call us. You'll be able to see, okay, how many of these funds have I already used? You don't have to call us. We're trying to make it to where you don't have to call us for every single thing. Because not that we won't call you back, but you want that answer now, in the next 5 minutes. And unless you, most likely text me or I'm like in front of you, we probably can't get that answer in that amount of time. And so we built a system to make that much easier. And also used AI to make it to where you can sort through thousands of our documents in seconds to be able to actually get that. And I have to say at this point, EOTS did a fantastic job. We were one of the first secretariats to use AI, and the team fought me for probably a month. And then once we did it, they were like, this is great, I don't know why we ever fought you on this matter. But those are the types of things that makes this much easier. The Chapter 90 projects tend to range between tiny and kind of medium. But right now, we're also undertaking massive projects. The first one, also multimodal. Many of you sit on many of the task forces for this. A lot of you have been in many different positions that have worked on this. We've been going at this for, I think, about a decade. Then we got $335 million. Then it became real. And what we're doing now is figuring out what this needs to look like. It's not just a highway project. The highway portion of this is actually very simple. I don't want to tell everyone that, but it is actually very simple. We just have to straighten it. It's the rest of it that is very difficult. West Station is an unbelievable opportunity for public transit. This is an unbelievable opportunity for the Alston Bright neighborhood that is currently cut off from the waterfront. They have been cut off for a very long time, and this is finally an opportunity to undo that. It really is about environmental justice, and this really is a multimodal project that requires a partnership between us, multiple municipalities, multiple universities, the MBTA, and Amtrak. This is a really tough needle to thread, but we're gonna do it. And at the end of it, this is going to be a transformational project that, first of all, I don't think anyone ever thought would get done. And I really don't think that that neighborhood ever thought that someone would care enough, that the federal government would care enough to make this level of investment. We will be talking about this, debating this for probably the next year. And after that period, then we will start putting together what this project is actually gonna look like, starting to put together what that timeline's gonna look like, and then getting this thing built as quickly as we possibly can. Sumner Tunnel. I love talking about Sumner Tunnel now because now we're done. So we just marked the last weekend of closures. We're done. We're done closing things. We got it done weeks ahead of time. We only had to close it down for 1 month. We thought it was gonna be 2. Now, we don't have to touch again for 75 years. So we've got a 75-year warranty. And none of us will be around to deal with the next closure, so it really doesn't matter at this point. But that's the kind of work that we're doing now. We're working with unbelievable contractors to incentivize them working quickly and working efficiently. So we're not having to close things down for extended periods of time. This is going to continue as we do more roadway work, bridge work. We're going to continue to incentivize getting it done quickly, and especially getting it done correctly, so that we're not having to come back 10, 20 years from now, that we're gonna be coming back closer to 100 years. Cape Cod bridges, this is another beast. Yeah, we're doing all this at the same time. We won about $1 billion for the first bridge. And now with state, federal funds, we're at about 1.72 billion. Yeah, it's a lot of money. We got the first bridge paid for. We've got some grant applications still out there for the second bridge. But this is another project that a lot of people had to come together on this one. It's not just the state, it was our local officials and especially our federal delegation. We have done very well when it's come to federal grants, really, really well. And without our federal delegation, without the legislature, we never would have been able to do this. And I think it is really a testament to the power of these partnerships. This administration can bring people together in a way that you don't see very often. Mainly just a lot of phone calls and not taking no for an answer. But this is a really big deal. Beyond replacing bridges that are moving towards structurally deficient, not unsafe, but structurally deficient, but it also serves the Cape residents, not just the tourists. I think a lot of people, when they think about Cape Cod, they think about wealthy people. They think about people with, multi-million-dollar beachfront homes, but anyone that spent time on the Cape, it's an environmental justice community. It just is, many of those communities are. I think what people don't realize is that they are struggling to live there. It's expensive for people to live there, especially if you're working in the service industry. And every year they have less and less options. And so for people to actually be able to get to their jobs, they need to be able to get over the bridges quickly. So it really is not just a structural project, it really is about equity. And it's also really addressing resiliency. Anyone that has spent any time down there during a massive rainstorm, or anytime we have a king tide, people are getting cut off. They're getting stuck in their neighborhoods until that water will go down. And so for us, this is also an opportunity to build in that resiliency so that people can live there as we are going through this climate change, that we're able to the best of our ability to protect those neighborhoods. West East Rail is another really big kind of sweep of projects that I'm really excited about, mainly because I live in central Massachusetts, so this is actually just selfishly for me. West East Rail is a really interesting opportunity that I think is also a suite of projects that a lot of people didn't think would ever happen. This is part of Compass Rail, which is addressing west-east, north-south, using Springfield as the center of that hub to finally expand intercity passenger rail out to western Massachusetts. We've received about $130 million for these projects. We're doing them in pieces. But this will make it to where you can come from Boston, go through Worcester, Springfield, and continue on to Albany, and hit Pittsfield on the way. This is something, like I said, that I don't think anyone thought would ever get done. And once again, through our federal delegation and administration that felt very strongly about connecting the entire Commonwealth and local officials that really kind of took a leap of faith with us. Many of them were just like, we can sign on to this, but you're never gonna get it. And then we did. And then we kept applying for more and more money, and we just kept getting more and more money. So for us right now, we're starting on the track work between Worcester and Springfield. We're also wrapping up Palmer study to open a new station in Palmer. Anyone that's been to Palmer knows that there's been a significant amount of investment, economic development, and a full spectrum of housing. And now for us, is being able to give them a station back. They have not had one, I think, since the 70s. And it is an unbelievable community that has made a lot of investments, and now we want to make the transportation investments they need to continue that growth. Talking about equity, free fares, anyone that knows me, is so incredibly important to me. This is something that, with my colleagues, I've been fighting for a decade. I talk about, when people ask me what is the most exciting thing you've gotten to do, and it really was to make that vote to get those reduced fares for the team. And now last week we announced that 13 of the 15 regional transit authorities, we have gotten them grant funding, they are going completely fare-free. So outside of 2 of them, you will be able to ride any of the RTA buses for free. And for anyone that lives outside the MBTA service area like I do, I live in Montechusett Regional Transit Authority, they really do yeoman's work. They connect communities that don't have any other options. And they connect them in a way that is not just, okay, well, these are the routes that we've been running for the last 3 decades, we'll just continue. We really have RTAs that have put in the time, put in the investment around service planning so that they can continue to fill those gaps. And the fact that each of their boards made the vote to go fare-free is amazing. Worcester was the first one. They have had a return to ridership that eclipsed what they had pre-pandemic as soon as they went free. Anyone that's ridden their system is unbelievable. They take you all over the city, a little bit outside the city, and they make sure they're doing it frequently, and they've also expanded services to the weekends. So you can tell we're doing a lot of stuff. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff. We're doing really, really big things. And I often say this, and it's not just because she's my boss, the governor and lieutenant governor push as far as, okay, what can you do? Okay, but what can you do more? Okay, well, you can do that, then what else can we do? You know, we're getting billions of dollars worth of funding, it's like, great, okay, what's the next grant cycle? How do we continue to go after that? And I think having leadership like that makes it to where you can do big things and know that you're not going to be held back. So for us at MassDOT, this has been a banner year. This has been an unbelievable opportunity, and I look forward to coming back a year from now and talk about all the other new projects that we started and give you more of an update on what I've talked about here today. So thank you for letting me brag on my team a little bit, and now I want to hand it over to the general manager.
Good afternoon. Is it good afternoon? Yes, it's good afternoon, right? Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Jim. I just want to comment on the Secretary. A lot of what I'm going to speak about, her leadership, her support has been instrumental in our ability to work together. And Jim talked a lot about transportation and how it's vital to the economy, how it's vital to the businesses, vital to the quality of life. And the Secretary's 100% right. Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, their administration, when I was discussing the opportunity to take on this role, it was about transportation and the importance of transportation to everything that we do, and how they're committed and focused on ensuring that we have a world-class transportation system to rebuild our infrastructure and rebuild public trust. And really, in combination, I know in my 40 years of transportation work, that shows my age a little bit, but multimodal transportation is essential. You need to have a transportation network that supports all modes. And as much as I want to focus on mass transportation and the system that I'm responsible for, I know how important highways and bridges are interconnected. The RTAs are a key part of transportation, and we're just one part of it, and an important part, but I really do believe in transportation as a whole. I often say transportation is like air and water. You cannot live without it. You need it. And when it's not there, that's when people's lives are impacted. That's when businesses are impacted. That's why this is so important. And I appreciate the Chamber for allowing this dialogue to take place, because there is so much going on, a lot of exciting things, a lot of challenges ahead, but so optimistic about where we are and where we can take this. One of the things that was key to taking on this role, and over the last year and a half, I think we've demonstrated a commitment to public transportation and our workforce to deliver that transportation. When I started, the agency was in the low 6,000 of employees. We are now at 7,800 employees. That is a huge leap from where we were initially. Even with incentives, we were having challenges of being able to retain people that were here, but also to be able to get people in the door. And over the last year and a half, we've demonstrated the ability to reinvent how we onboard people, how we engage with the folks that want to work here. And now we have a list of people that are waiting to join, because more people want to be part of where we're taking this. And that's important, because an engaged workforce that is motivated and understands the importance of mass transportation is what's going to help continue to build upon the success that we have today, but the success beyond where we are, because that's what we want, long, sustainable success into the future. But the workforce is just one part of it, our infrastructure, and the need to really focus on our infrastructure. And I know a lot of discussions have been about the subways, the slow speeds, and rightly so. When we started, there were over 200, probably close to 240 speed restrictions. And in the first 6 months, we started to tackle them, doing business in this similar way, trying to do things on the overnight, trying to do things on weekends, trying to do things on some extended hours. But with the amount of work that we needed to do, we saw that we could not really make the progress we needed. And I have to thank the business community, I have to thank the public, and I have to thank the administration and the secretary for the support, because in November, that's when we decided and announced the track and improvement program. And that was a series of closures strategically done throughout the system. And I believe when we announced it in November of last year, we had about 191 speed restrictions in the system. And that's across all of the lines on the subways, light and heavy rail. And today, I believe we're at 17 speed restrictions remaining in the system. Represents 1% of our system now. And I remember even before I took on the role, you know, the fact that we had system-wide speed restrictions across every line, across the entire system, it's a long way. And what that means is a commitment to not only rebuilding our infrastructure today, but making sure that we maintain that system. So come Saturday, the Orange Line will be reopened from Oak Grove to North. That will be the first time the Orange Line is restriction-free in 15 years. That is going to be a testament to the work that has been done, but thanks to the businesses and the patience of everybody, we're going to maintain that moving forward. Blue Line was restriction-free back in May, and I'm proud to say because of that, we are running more service on the Blue Line today than we ran pre-pandemic, and that is because we have the tracks that can run reliably. When you can run reliably and you maintain speeds, now you're adhering to the schedules. That means less drop trips. But that's also supported because of the hiring that we've done. Without the operators, we couldn't have the level of trains. Green Line headways are 2 to 3 minutes in the trunk. We will make Green Line restriction-free by the end of the year. That will be when we celebrate the whole system being restriction-free, and I'm confident to say that here. I mentioned Blue Line was restriction-free in May. Those headways are 4 minutes, a little bit, 4.5 minutes. Orange Line today, even though it's not done, is about 6-minute headways that we're seeing. And that's come a long way with regards to when I first started. I remember when I was commuting from Forest Hill, say 12 minutes, 13 minutes, sometimes longer. And that's where the frustration is. If you miss a train, you're frustrated because now you're waiting double-digit time. But now as we start to rebuild the system, Red Line is 5-minute headways, 5 to 6 minutes. We can now start to improve the frequency. On top of the tracks though, as we eliminate all the speed restrictions, new rolling stock. Orange Line, all the cars have been replaced. They're all with new cars. I'm proud to say that as we reset the contract requirements, and part of that was diving into material supplies, escalation, and really taking things that were outside control of the manufacturer. We have now been receiving the cars on the schedules that been set. This month we will receive 6 cars, 3 now repairs. 4 of them are Red Line, but the Orange Line now, all brand new cars, and those cars are performing far better than the original Orange Line cars that we took out. I believe the Orange Line cars were having failures every 29,000 miles. The contract requirement for the new cars is 90,000 miles, and the cars are performing over 200,000 miles between failures. So that is showing the reliability of the rolling stock. We will do that for Red Line as well. So fix the track, fix the rolling stock. We're continuing to focus on the signals, the signal upgrades on red and orange are now about 50% done. That will allow us to operationally have more flexibility and manage schedules better. And then systematically rebuilding our power system. So that's just the subway system as we start to rebuild. And that's instrumental to a lot of folks more frequency, less waiting time, reliable trips, and if you have more than one seat, the ability to know that those connections will be quick and prompt, I think will bring people back. I'm gonna work with all of you to see how we can encourage employers to have more people come back. I'm trying to do the same thing with all the conversations I'm having, because the better people understand their trips are improving, the more likely that people can say, it's not the T is the reason, we need to have reasons to come back. But other modes, all of the system, as I mentioned, tie together. Our bus program, with the hiring that we've had, our drop trips have dropped dramatically. We are running more reliable buses, more frequent buses, and with the first phase of the bus network redesign, we're gonna have frequencies of every 15 minutes on those routes. We're gonna strongly improve how buses can serve, and that's to improve dialogue with the different communities, how buses can run on those corridors. It's a key part of tying together, because buses carry about 40% of our ridership. So that's another important component to not just the subways, that gets a lot of attention. Probably won't get as much when we're running as reliably as I know we will next year, but that's okay too. But then the other modes, paratransit. The fact is that, and Secretary mentioned it, income eligible fares, the first ever here, we reduced the fares for those that need it the most by 50%, and that's across all modes. And I remember at the board meeting, there was concern about whether or not paratransit can manage the reduced fares and the increased ridership. Because we restructured the salaries for the operators, we've seen a growth of rider operators, and we've been able to, even with income eligible, be able to maintain 94% on-time performance without paratransit, and that is a huge thing for folks that need to rely on transportation. The other component, ferries, with the amount of water transportation opportunities, the Healy Driscoll administration has been very instrumental in us looking at water transportation. Last year when we launched the Lynn Ferry, we saw how people gravitated to it. So not only did we start to run it earlier this year, we're running it longer to the end of November. We're doing that with the East Boston Ferry. We're doing that. We're taking a look at how we manage water service. Because not only are the current routes important, we want to look at how do we maybe build better routes in the future. How do we take water transportation to the next level? And that's why we have, for the first time ever at the T, a director of ferry services too. It wasn't a part-time role anymore, it is a full-time role, because we know how instrumental that is. And when you have beautiful full days like today, I think a lot of people would take advantage of riding on the waters. One area I haven't talked about yet, commuter rail. That is probably one of the areas where we can say ridership definitely has returned. In the high, low 90s, but close to mid-90% return to ridership with pre-pandemic. And that's because of the innovation of having commuter rail run more frequently, more reliably. When you have the ability to say that we are running the same level of service all day long and then on weekends, that gives people more flexibility in their travel. We are seeing that we are leading the nation in return to ridership on commuter rail, and we want to build upon that. The announcement not too long ago to electrify the Fairmont line is just the beginning of the future. Not only do we want to make our system more reliable, we want to make people know that we are environmentally friendly and that we are a preferred mode of choice. But electrifying those trains will allow us to run even better service on the Fairmont. And as we can get more improved frequency, more reliability, we're going to see even more people ride. We exercised an option with Hyundai Rotem to order more bi-level coaches because we know that importance. And we're continuing to look at other opportunities to continue to grow our system. We're looking at locomotive needs and continuing to build upon the successes of commuter rail. I think that is going hand in hand with our buses, power transit, subways, so vitally important to the transportation system. But then the other key components of our structure, our stations. How do you make our stations welcoming? How do you make our stations feel safe? We've been piggybacking a lot of station work along with the track work where we have opportunities. But it's not just the subways, it's the commuter rail, reopening stations that probably would have still been closed had we not thought outside the box. Lynn Station, that was not scheduled to be open until later on this year. We opened it last year. And that's finding creative ways to do things differently. And I want the business community to know that the T maybe has, and this is not just the T, I think public transportation agencies, sometimes the way we've done things for the last 10 years or so, what we want to do is think outside the box. How do we deliver projects differently? How do we take taxpayer dollars and deliver results today and make tough decisions, but make them now? The ability to demonstrate that we can do that is what we've been trying to do. The track program that I talked about in the subways, the amount of work that we've done in this last year since November equates to about 40 years of work because of the full closures and the fact that we're running 24/7 construction activities. Imagine trying to do that amount of work, 24 days of the red line when we shut down from Al Wife to, I think it was Broadway. I'm sorry, Braintree to Broadway. Those 24 days, we did 70,000 linear feet of rail replacement. Compare that to 30 days of Orange Line prior in 2022, was only 6,000 feet. So we did 11 times more productivity in less days. And that's us pushing ourselves and the contractors and the consultants who support us to show that we can do things better, and that we can do things more efficiently, more cost effectively. And the idea is to deliver results today, results that are important to the public, to the riders, to the businesses that we support, and to demonstrate that we can deliver moving forward even more. I think that is important to when we start talking about continuing to fund the T going forward, we want to demonstrate that we have that ability. The Secretary talked about a lot of exciting big mega projects that are going to be game changers for Massachusetts on the MassDOT side, and we're part of some of those. Another one that I'd like to talk about is the North Station Draw 1 Bridge, and that one is $1.2 billion in total cost right now. We won a $472 million grant from the federal government, the USDOT awarded us. That was a very competitive project, $800 million total across the country available. We got $472 million of it. And what I like to talk about is that shows the confidence in the federal government that they have in the MBTA. Because they not only don't award the dollars to agencies based on the project needs and the competitiveness of it, but they also award it on the deliverability of these projects. So I want everyone to know that when the federal government is supporting MassDOT, supporting MBTA, it's not only because those projects are worthy candidates, it's because they know that we can deliver. And right now, that project is going to be advertised next year. We're going to go design build, but we're excited about delivering those types of projects. One of the things I'd like to talk about is how, in my past history, learn to deliver projects faster, quicker, make the public say, wow, I didn't believe public servants could do that. And the ability to deliver, I'm just going to use the Long Island Railroad's third track project that I had the ability to work on. That was one where you had a 10-mile stretch of the main line of Long Island Railroad's corridor. 290 trains go through that corridor every day. So how do you add a third track adjacent to a $2.6 billion project and do that on time, on budget? Well, when it was first announced in 2016, we went through an environmental process in 2 years, record of decision, broke ground in 2018. 4 years later, substantially complete, on time, under budget, $2.6 billion, and running 290 trains adjacent to it. North Station Draw 1, we're just as excited about delivering that project because that carries the 4 main lines to the north, and it's going to be instrumental to not only improving and making sure we have reliable commuter rail service today. It's going to give us so much operational flexibility as we take those 4 tracks across that bridge, turn it into 6 tracks, and do a lot of track improvements on both sides of that facility. And we're going to demonstrate how we can do that and manage train traffic, keep people moving. And again, it's how do we push ourselves to be better and continue to be good stewards of public taxpayer dollars. I'm probably not even following any of the notes that I was given, but there is so much more to do. Accessibility, today, we just, the last day of the Type 10 cars for the mock-ups, and I talked about red and orange line cars, Type 10 green line cars, the light rail vehicles, they're over at Government Center Plaza, take a chance to see it, it's there till 7 o'clock. That is the future, 50% longer, more capacity to carry people, all low level across the whole train, so you don't have to navigate steps. And once that is in place, and when we start to run those, we'll be able to now start to have the ability to bring all of our stations to where you have level warning, accessibility. So Secretary mentioned income eligible, we want to make it more affordable, but we want to make it easier to use our system. That goes to accessibility needs for everybody. That goes to the contactless payment which we launched. And I remember when I first started, everyone was saying, maybe we should cancel that project, it's going nowhere. Guess what? We figured out how to deliver it, and people are using it, over 4 million taps to date, and it's continuing to grow. So those are the things where we want to push ourselves, that we can be problem solvers, that we can deliver improved transportation, and that we can make this place where not only are you seeing your businesses thrive today, they could even grow bigger and better. And your employees and the people that visit your businesses should know that Massachusetts is indeed one of the best places in the world to live, work, and play. And we're a key part of it. Couldn't be more proud to be part of that. And I think I was supposed to play a video before I started, but maybe it's okay if I play the video at the end. Is that ready and teed up?
In November of 2023, we made a promise to eliminate all 191 speed restrictions across our subway system and bring our tracks into a state of good repair by the end of 2024. And we're well on our way. Our teams have been hard at work, repairing and modernizing the T, and we have plenty to show for it. But it's not just about the tracks. It's about better service. More trains, shorter headways, faster and more frequent trips on the red, orange, green, and blue lines. Through our track improvement program, we've already returned more than 88 minutes of travel time back to our riders, and it's only going to get better. Across our entire network, we're building a better T, with consistent, all-day commuter rail service to match your schedule, expanded ferry service to better connect the region, and increased service hours on our most popular bus routes, with 4 new high-frequency routes being added. With so much happening, there's never been a better time to get on board, and our riders agree. Thank you for riding the T.
And I'm proud of all the work that we've done to date. Probably would not have taken it all if I didn't really believe in public transportation and the importance of it. But I also believe in the communication piece, and that's why this is important to us, be able to have the opportunity to speak, share what we're doing, but also share about where we think that we can take this in the future. And I really, truly believe that we have a system that everyone should be proud of, and we can be even more proud of it as we continue to build upon it. So Jim, I just want to say thanks for allowing me the opportunity to be here.
All right, let's have a conversation.
Plan on doing this for a long time?
I do. Am I on now? Yeah, okay. So first of all, I know that many of you will find this hard to believe, but you saw that video of the guys working on the tracks. I actually did that when I was 19 years old, and Phil, when we first met, threatened to give me back the hammer and put me to work down there.
I did tell Jim we're hiring, so didn't bite the bait there.
I had prepared questions, and I'm going to get to them, but I have some follow-up observations and questions that I'd like to begin with first. As I was listening to Phil, not working from his notes and talking so eloquently and passionately about public transportation and the T and the work of the T and with such pride in what his team is accomplishing. I said to myself, that's exactly what we needed. That's what we needed running the MBTA. And you know, Secretary, when you brought up and filled it as well, the importance of the leadership in the governor's office, it reminded me just shortly after the election, when you know, Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll were elected, and before they actually took office, and we sat down and she wanted to know, you know, what's it gonna take to fix this? And I don't think she'll mind me telling this story, that I asked her a pretty frank question. I said, you know, from my perspective, since Mike Dukakis governors have survived the T, they haven't fixed the T, and they really haven't leaned into fixing the T. And this was in privacy. I said, Governor, do you want to survive the T for the next 4 or 8 years, or do you really want to fix it? And she said, I want to fix it. So I said, well, that's going to take some bold action. She said, where do we begin? I said, you hire a real transit guy. And, you know, I think, Phil, you came out of central casting when it comes to a real transit guy, and I won't get too deeply into it, but I think we tried everything else before we hired Phil. So it's great to have you on board. Secretary, thanks for connecting the dots on housing, transportation, economic growth, access, opportunity, and equity, particularly in different regions of the state. It's what we talked quite a bit about, and you really brought it to life. You brought up a couple of things that I really wanted to follow up on, and just not to dive too deeply into although I'll come back to it later, the task force. You mentioned Chapter 90 and how important that is to the cities and towns, and I remember doing one of the presentations about Chapter 90. There was some reports about how it really hasn't grown or kept pace with the cost of doing business. So in reality, while the cities and towns are getting roughly the same as they've gotten for a long time, the costs have sort of gone up so much that they're able to do less. What's your sense of that need and our ability to satisfy more of those local needs? Not the things that MassDOT works on, and not the things that the T works on, but the things that are happening in our cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth that really are top of mind for everyone. We all think about that street that we drive, or that rotary, or whatever it is. Talk about those things and our ability to, whether it's through Chapter 90 or other mechanisms, to provide the resources to do those things.
So you really did hit it. I mean, the funding has been the same, but the cost of these projects continues to increase every year. And I think the number of these projects that are needed continues to increase every year. This is something, especially Lieutenant Governor Driscoll is really focused on right now, is figuring out what additional funds are needed and how we can actually get those additional funds into the hands. The other big thing we're doing is offering a significant amount of technical assistance, so they're not having to spend as much money on consultants. DOT is coming in to actually help do that work. But this is something that, as we go into the next fiscal year, this is gonna be something we spend a lot of time talking about, because we're definitely going to need more.
Yeah, I can tell you that we and the members of the task force were very impressed with the presentations by people advocating on behalf of the cities and towns with respect to the need for funding, so I think you'll have a lot of support for that. I want to talk about, you mentioned the passion you have for free fares. Phil, you used another phrase, income eligible. Some people call it means-based. You know, as we thought of that free fares thing, part of it is that when you make it free, not everyone needs free. And income eligible or means-based gets to the target without sort of leaving money on the sideline, if you will. It's a bit of a philosophical question, I know, but talk to us about the public policy issue embedded within that choice.
I think you hit it on the head. It is a philosophical issue. I think when you talk about systems that are smaller than the T, when you're talking about the regional transit providers, I don't want to say it's easy, but it is easier because we do have the ability to give grant funds to cover that. When it comes to the T, this is just such a different scale. It is also a completely different type of service. And this is something that I do think we've talked a lot about, for the T to go free, or any large transit agency in the country to go free, there has to be a completely different way that you are funding public transit, especially when we're talking about train service. There is not enough money from even a federal standpoint to be able to cover that. So I think when you're talking about income-based fares, I think that is actually the most impactful thing you can do that you can actually sustain. Because that's the other thing, if you go fare-free, there's no going back. You can't step back from that. And also when you're talking about a system that needs to grow, it's much easier to grow a bus-only system than it is a rail system. So I do think that T is taking a big leap in doing the income-based, and I would be surprised anytime in the near future if you saw any large transit agency in the United States go completely fare-free until there's a completely different way that we fund transit. It is just not reasonable, and I'm not sure that it actually is going to get to the actual central point of equity.
Yeah. Phil, you touched on all of the benefits of what you're able to do because of all the work you've done on slow zones. And by the way, that's an example of a bold action that, I think we've been hesitant to take, what you did in terms of being willing to take the hits on, closing sections of track for weeks and even a month at a time. But I think people are willing to endure it if they see the results, and we're seeing the results. Ultimately, the translation of that into ridership is the ultimate goal, getting people on public transit. How do you think about that? And as I was thinking about your remarks in this area, it kind of made me think that, at least in the business community in downtown, it was pretty easy for an employee to be late and blame the T. You're taking that excuse away, Phil. If you keep improving reliability this way. But talk about that ridership growth strategy.
Sure. Well, you talked a little bit about fares, right? And making it affordable is important. But I also think if the system is not, at least people don't believe it's safe, if it's not frequent enough, and if it's not reliable enough, it doesn't matter what the cost is, right? So a lot of this effort has been about rebuilding not only the workforce to do it, but the infrastructure to give us the ability to now run the schedules that we need to run, the schedules that the public needs to rely on. And that's why trips are up, drop trips are down, frequencies up, wait times between trains are improved. Myself, I have the opportunity now to take blue to green, and literally when I change seats, I'm only waiting a minute, maximum 2, when I get to whether it's green line or when I'm waiting for the blue line, right? And some days I'll even take the East Boston Ferry because I don't mind the extra seat. It's a nice day. Let me do it, because I know when I get to the government center, the blue line will be right there. And again, it's the ability to take transportation and not have to think about, am I going to be late, or do I need to give myself that extra? That 88 minutes, that's every day. That's not just once, that's every day that you take the train. So when we do that now, now we have to get out, we have to start messaging. We now need to let people know, let's start as your rating, that's the old T. We're not gonna do that. We're not gonna fall back into that state of disrepair. Our thing now is to make sure as we rebuild it, and there's still a lot of work, don't get me wrong. What we've done in this year was record and historic, but there's still so much more that I would have loved to have done if we had more time. But how do you get it back? We're gonna maintain it now. We're gonna make sure that going forward, we do the right level of inspections, maintenance, corrective repairs, and we're going to do that timely. And then we're gonna continue to allow that to enable us now to build better and modernize the system. But it's about communication, letting people know that you can start to rely on it. And Jim made the joke that people won't be able to say the T was the reason that we were late. And that's where hopefully, I can work with the business communities to discuss what are the things that you're hearing from your employees, and how do we make it even better, or how do we communicate some of the things that we just shared today? Because I think some of the things that maybe folks will choose to stay home is because their day-to-day travels are harder. But when you take that away, you actually make it more enjoyable. there's some good things about riding public transportation, whether it's just to snooze for an extra 20 minutes, whether it's to catch up on emails or read the newspaper, listen to music. You know, it can be quite relaxing actually when you're taking mass transportation and letting someone else get you to a point, you know, where you need to go. And it's not just for work, it's about all the other things that this great state has. All the cultural diversity, the restaurants, the sporting events, the historic places, museums. You think about it, that's where we saw, even during the pandemic, the ridership on the weekends were always robust. Essential workers need us. That's why it's vital. But I think we need to actually now, as we fix things, message to let people know, take the T. Doesn't mean you have to always get out of your car, but it gives you the option, and it's a really good option. And right now, it's very affordable.
I think you hit it on the head, Phil, that, you know, people want to feel like they have a viable choice, depending upon what that day looks like. You know, if it's a day I need my car because I have to shoot over and, you know, get to a little league game or something like that, great. But if it's a day that I can take the T and, as you say, you know, maybe relax a little bit, although I would have said read the newspaper too, but we'd be dating ourselves. I think it's supposed to be, I think it's listen to podcasts or something like that people are probably doing these days. Phil, you brought up safety, and, you know, when you walked in the door, I'm sure you got handed the 2022 report of the feds about safety on the T. I'm sure it was probably one of the first meetings you had in your first 48 hours in terms of what that said. It talked about operational practices, it talked about a culture of safety, and, you know, we're 2 years later. Give us an update on that relationship with the federal government on the safety of the T.
Well, the whole federal safety management inspection program, there's a good part of it. It forced us to really take a hard look at ourselves and look in the mirror, you know, what do we need to improve? And the fact that safety is such a topic is a good thing because we don't want to lose sight of it. It's very easy to get complacent even when things are going well. And so we need to remind ourselves about how do we do things every day, whether you're in the field or whether you're in the office or whether you're at home, to do things safely. And I do know that it's very hard when you have all the regulators on top and looking at every single thing we do. At the same time, it puts us in checks and balances to make sure we're doing the right thing. And I always believe that you can continuously always improve even when you think you've done well. I didn't mind that role. Personally, I think it was important to reinforce safety, and we do it every day, as I say. And it shouldn't have to be that we do that, but what we needed to do is really engage with the workforce and get the workforce to realize that we mean it. We're not just saying it, but we mean it. And that meant, as we reshaped the leadership team, how do we get out and we actually observe how people are performing? What do they need? Where do they need more instruction? What are the manuals that we have in place, and what are the procedures? And we are actually right now, and working with the federal government, working with DPU, who is our state safety oversight agency, we are taking a hard look at things, and we know that we can continue to build upon it. It is a cultural shift because we want people to share information. That's the only way to get better. And when incidents do occur, we learn from them too, and we need to improve. We've come a long way, but we have a lot more to do. But I think the workforce does see that we care because whether it's the track work, whether it's just performing day-to-day activities, they're seeing management not only say what we want to do, but we're out in the field with them, whether it's responding to incidents, whether it's watching construction. And that's the way we've actually improved. Over the course of this year, every one of those diversions, we've gotten more and more productive. And that's because we're improving safety, but we're also seeing, you know, what tools, what equipment do you need, and how can we make it better for them. And they're motivated. They're seeing the results of their hard efforts, and that also comes into play because, you know, safety becomes with yourself, and then you have to watch out for your colleagues, right? And that's what we try to remind everybody.
The secretary and I were up in Toronto just last week and met with some folks in transit up there. And this issue of safety and the relationship to ridership, and not just the reality of safety, but the perception of safety. whether people feel like, what's my experience going to be like, and, to your point about choices, am I better off making another choice? So I think that your focus on safety is such a critical element of that ridership equation, and getting people to buy into the fact that their experience, whether it's in the station or on board the train, is going to be a safe experience. Secretary, I know you're a data junkie, and Phil talked about about public transit. Talk about roadway safety, highways, bridges, commuting, and what you're seeing in the data, and where your focus is. I'm sure safety is a big part of the beyond mobility.
Yes.
Strategy. Talk about roadway safety.
I am a data junkie, I think anyone knows me, I love data. Safety is one of the central tenets of Beyond Mobility. And it is safety across the system, whether it is on our roadways, whether it's on our structures. I think people probably ask me the most about bridge safety. Usually like, okay, I travel over this bridge, tell me, really, is it safe? Yes, it is. We are a very safe state when it comes to our infrastructure. Anytime we have an unsafe bridge, we close it. It is not always a popular decision, but we do not keep unsafe bridges open. Structurally deficient bridges, those are the types of things like the Cape Cod bridges, where you're really looking at the next kind of 10, 15, 20 years, it really does need to be replaced. For us, we are doing bridge inspections every single day. We do them by using our engineers. We have been utilizing drone technology over the last several years to also be doing our bridge inspections. We keep ratings on all of our bridges, and it feeds into a database. So we are constantly monitoring it, and so is FHWA, especially when we're looking at funding. Roadway safety. Once again, we are actually one of the safest states in the United States. We don't just rest on that one. What we've done is really invested in using the data and using best practices, whether we're talking about speeds and working with municipalities to lower speeds. We spend a lot of time through our impact dashboard really tracking where there are incidents, and then investing and actually making improvements. So whether that's upgrading an intersection, whether it's adding flashing signs, whether it is really investing on a complete redesign of a roadway. Springfield, for example, anyone that's used the Springfield X, that interchange is a nightmare. It is also creates a lot of unsafe situations, so we're completely replacing it. One of the other things, kind of based on the data, we figured out 41% of pedestrian incidents are happening within 300 feet of a bus stop. We tracked this, and now we're going through and replacing bus stops and giving municipalities money to be able to replace those bus stops. When I talk about the impact dashboard, this is tracking every single incident in Massachusetts, whether it is a fatality, whether it's just a casualty. We track the severity of the situation, and we go and make those improvements. Pedestrians, it is very difficult for a lot of our pedestrians to get across many of our roadways, so we have invested in putting out hundreds of flashing signs. Working with, right now, we probably have about 120 municipalities that we have put better pedestrian infrastructure in. But it's also working with private industry. We have more truck safety regulations than any other state. This is working not just with municipal trucks, state trucks, private industry to start putting additional safety measures. Also, the vulnerable user law. We pushed very hard working with the legislature to get this through to where we are putting in actual legislation, actual laws, that if you do not give that space to a vulnerable user, whether a pedestrian, a cyclist, someone with a mobility device, there are repercussions. And we are gonna continue to add more and more safety options, standards into this. And this is stuff outside of Chapter 90. So these are additional funds that we are using. But even with all of that, we are still having incidents. And one of the things we talk about is Vision Zero has been going on for a very long time. No one has hit zero anywhere in the United States. But for us, our fatalities are lower than any other state, but they still exist. We had over 400 last year. We are trending to have close to 400 this year, and every one of them matters to us. And so when I say that we take this personally, we have fatality meetings. Every 2 weeks, our team sits down and goes through a slideshow of every single person we lost. We talk about the families, we talk about what they do, and I think that's what it takes to make it personal. The GM talks a lot about safety, and he talks about it the same way. You have to take this personal. And that makes it very easy for us to continue to come up with safety measures and put them in place.
Secretary, you used the phrase, you talked about the tunnel project. You used the phrase that we're proving we can do big things again. And, I think that we're all living and we see it and we hear it. Some big hangover still when we talk about doing big things. I think, because I follow this very closely, I think we're gonna look back at 2024 as the year that we turn the corner on transportation in Massachusetts. I think that you both said we have a lot of work to do, and we do, but I think that as we look forward, this will be a year that we turn the corner, because we're confronting the problems in a true way. So given that, this is just year one, and I wanna take you up 25 years, because people wanna hear, what's the ultimate vision? What do you see as the transportation network of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts 25 years from now? And Phil, I'd ask you to comment, where can we take this thing? And I'll just add that, many of us travel, and many of my members travel all over the world, and they come back and they tell me about remarkable systems in other parts of the world, and why can't we do that? This is Boston, why can't we have that? Can we have that? What is it, it's 2025 next year. What does 2050 look like if you said this is what we can do?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I hate when people go anywhere internationally, because then they come back with a laundry list of things. I think for me, your zip code and where you live will no longer dictate how you move. You won't have to own a car. You won't have to take hours and hours to be able to get to work. You'll be able to actually make a choice based on where you want to work, and know that you are going to have a transit option that is affordable. And I think when we talk about everything we're doing every single year, because I do think you made a really good point, I think it's kind of hard for us to step back because we have so many things that we want to keep pushing for. 2024 was a change. If we can keep on this trajectory, you are going to see rail service throughout Massachusetts. You're also gonna see electrified. You're also going to see more water transportation. You are gonna see more buses that are moving quicker, ideally in their own dedicated lane. It really is going to make it to where we're not forced to sit in a car, we're not forced to spend money, and that your quality of life isn't dependent on what zip code you live in. And we will get there, I feel confident.
So, I remember when I first took this role, or at least when I was announced, I said this is the best system in the world. And I think in some ways, we should think about it that way, because so many people don't have what we have, and they wish they could. And if you come from an area that doesn't have mass transportation, this is exciting to see. And, I think you talked about it, Secretary, people come here. My daughter came to school here, and she fell in love with the system, and she fell in love, and now she lives here, and she works in Foxborough. But I knew she wasn't coming back to New York at the time. When I have the opportunity to talk with my agencies in their challenges, whether it's at the American Public Transportation Association or other industry functions, we actually now being asked, how are you doing that? How are you turning things around? And we are showing that we are now leading other people on how to build the workforce back, how to rebuild our infrastructure, how to address safety. You talk about the FDA site. One of the things I talked about with, a lot of folks knew Randy Clark when he was here, but he's head of WMATA. you know, how do we take the lessons learned and start sharing that with other agencies that are going through similar things? You know, our friends at SEPTA in Philadelphia are now under oversight. But we're not only rebuilding it now where our agencies in the US are looking at us, but you're talking about how do we build for the future? And you're 100% right. The demonstration in 2024 is showing that the future is bright and that we're going to continue building upon it. I think everyone has seen how important transportation is, and what we've done in 1 year, we can do now beyond. And that's why I think there's so much dialogue about how to keep transportation going, and that's going to be instrumental for us to plan out further. But I envision where the multimodal transportation is convenient, where you can, whether it's coming into Boston or going in the reverse, to have that frequency. Decarbonization, yes, the Phillip Eng is our first test, but we're gonna be looking at other areas. How do we accelerate that? Water service, water transportation service. Partners at FTA, I've had an opportunity to go to Rhode Island several times to look at the zero emission ferries. You know, so that is something else to look at. How do we take all of our modes? Later this year, we'll have the first 10 electric battery buses coming into our system, and that's building out the facility. So not only is it going to be a more reliable, more frequent, but it's going to be connected, and our goal is to keep moving towards less and less emissions. But more reliable gets people out of their cars, and then we could then reduce our carbon footprint even better. But we have the bones of a fantastic system, and right now it works really well. It can get better, and I know it can. And that means eliminating those pinch points that slow down trains. You know, whether we have single track territory or double track and we need to go beyond, do we have enough yard space? So those are the things that we're going to be looking at. How do we start accumulating those things to allow us to build out every project we decide is not only going to solve a local problem, but my goal is to make sure it supports the larger scale projects and beyond, right? Keep moving the needle in the right direction. And then we'll start to show that we can deliver these things even sooner than people believe, quicker than people believe. And my goal is to show that we can even do it more cost effectively than people believe.
So, that vision and all the work that you've already started takes money. The three of us are on the funding task force, as are others in the room. You mentioned secretary to report to in just a couple of months now, and all of the good and hard work and hours spent on this topic. Without getting too much into the details of it all, it's just my sense of it is that, well, I reject the notion that all we're gonna produce is a toolkit. I really don't wanna do that, because I think we could have spent far less hours producing a toolkit of what the.
Remember, I didn't say toolkit.
No, I know you didn't, but it's out there. But I do think, if nothing else, and I don't mean that maybe the way it came out, we need to create a stabilization plan for the next 3 years that enables this work to continue, that eliminates the cliffs, whatever they may be, in both, you know, road, bridge, and public transit, enabling us to take a deeper dive on maybe some of the more bold interventions. I'm not advocating for anything, whether it's tolls, congestion pricing, vehicle mileage travel, whatever it turns out to be. Other jurisdictions have taken as much as a decade to process those things, and you know, we're not going to do it in 10 months. Not to say that they shouldn't be on the table. Do you think that that's where we can go? And as a follow-up to that, without giving you a chance to answer yet, you know, the fair share amendment provided some money, and there's more money than expected. There's some expectation, fairly or unfairly, that that money was gonna solve a lot of these problems. And I know that from a business community's perspective and even a public perspective, people wanna know, where's that money going? And can that be the source of this stabilization that you know, we think we need for the next couple of years? Your thoughts on the approach to the final report and, you know, this issue of, you know, the expectations of what the fair share amendment was supposed to do?
trying to think of which one to start with. We'll start with fair share.
Okay.
Fair share has performed much better than I think anyone thought it was going to do. We don't have enough people in the Commonwealth for that to fix this problem. The scale is just not there. I think what we've been able to do so far has been fantastic. I think being able to transfer funds to the T, like we just did, to be able to get that reliability, being able to give the general manager the ability to bring on more fleet, the ability to get more trains running quicker. That is the type of stuff that does pay dividends. That is the type of thing that the public did buy, and that's amazing. That's not gonna be enough to address the fiscal cliff. And the entire nation is going through the same thing. So I don't wanna get out ahead of the task force report, but what I think would be helpful is kind of looking at what are some potential near-term things we can do? What are some potential long-term things we can do? Because we're going to have to look at this over many years. Even if all of the options that were in this, everyone's like, yay, legislature's like, great, let's sign off on every single thing. It's not going to fix this fiscal cliff as quickly as the T needs it to. So we need to keep getting creative about this. Working with Secretary Borkowitz, the Secretary of A&F, we have gotten very creative in how we're using fair share, and we're going to continue that creativity to make sure that not only the system can continue to improve, but that the system is going to continue to operate to a level that the general manager is building it to. But this is going to be multiple steps, multiple years, and multiple interventions.
So, along those lines of money, Phil, there was a recent back and forth on commuter rail fare evasion, 25%, no it's not. I will say anecdotally, I live in Dorchester, so I don't take commuter rail. But anecdotally, people do talk about fares being collected or not on commuter rail. And, you know, as we think about asking the public and others for money, it is not unreasonable for people to say, well, they should just collect the fares that, you know, they're supposed to be getting. What's your sense of that? You know, the fare evasion issue system-wide and on this recent kerfuffle about what it is on commuter rail?
So, fares are always a part of the equation here, but they won't solve the deficit itself. Having said that, fair payment, fair collection is important. You know, one of the things I've made a priority is with my regular discussions with our operator on the commuter rail side, is what are we doing about improving and making it easier to collect fares. And month by month, we are seeing that the collections by the conductors and the payments are increasing at a greater rate than the ridership, so it shows that we're closing the gap. And the other component is that we are having discussions right now on how to accelerate the fare gates both at South Station and Back Bay. We saw the improvement of fare collection in North Station when that was implemented, and we're working through how do we accelerate that. And that part of that is we're working with the other developers that have other projects in the area. On the subway side, light rail, Green Line in particular, absolutely. How do we improve fare collection, particularly when we do not have gates? We recently have 16 fare engagement officers, fare engagement personnel that were brought on board, have been trained, and they've been interacting with the riders on the Green Line. And where we've seen their interaction at those stations, we've actually seen the fare payments go up by 30–35%. Just through that interaction, and that's not even enforcement, that's just education of talking about the contactless payment, talking about income eligible, and just talking about the importance of payment. That's just the beginning of fare engagement, but it's absolutely a key part of how do we continue to remind folks of the importance of that. I know how it is when you are paying and you see someone else who doesn't pay, and that is a challenge that has to be done. I know we're not the only agency that has that issue, and I know a lot of agencies have spent a lot of money trying to implement different means. and yet there are folks who still do it. But I'm not giving up. That's an important area, and I'm pleased to say that the fair engagement staff that we have are making a difference. We're going to be looking at other technology as well. So it's something that's top of mind, because when you say you have operating deficits, fares are a part of it, but they won't solve the whole deficit. But it's definitely important, because, again, if I ask you to pay, why shouldn't I pay myself then, right?
So some of this line, a lot of this line of questioning has set up my closing question. You know, you're in a business in which the tolerance for failure is almost zero. If your on-time performance is 95%, that means something was late 1 out of 20 trips, and that's the one everyone remembers, and that's the one that gets reported on. Technology and human beings fail from time to time, and those are the things that get reported and create impressions. Beyond the infrastructure improvements, the cultural improvements, and all of the work that we talked about, you know, the challenge, it seems to me, you have is building up trust and confidence to the point that people are willing to say, I'm willing to provide the resources, whether it's the business community or the riding public or the taxpayers and whoever it is. I'm willing to provide the resources because they've developed trust and confidence in me. And part of that is, what did you do with the fair share money? Part of it is, why aren't all those fares being collected? Talk about your thoughts on that challenge, which I think is probably a little bit harder than all the other things that you may be engaged in. Making people believe that, as I said earlier, 2024 was the year we turned the corner. And, you know, this is the time in which these investments need to be made. Talk about your thoughts on getting to that trust and confidence.
Well, I think it is every day improving ourselves that we can deliver. It is about showing that we can deliver regardless of the challenges ahead. And, you know, I think when I go back to last year, I don't know if anyone believed that we could actually eliminate the speed restrictions in just over a year's timeline, and we're on the cusp of doing that. I don't know if anyone believed that we could even do that on budget, or in this case, under budget. I talked about this at the board meeting, the alternative bus service that we had to support those closures. We had anticipated $165 million we would need to support it. We're actually saving $70 million in terms of the amount of bus service that was needed, and that's through managing the outages and managing how we provide the level of services. But the track work itself, we actually delivered more than 100% of the work that we had planned on doing. And we did it with a lot of full depth repairs. These are not just Band-Aids for those sections that we've done. We're delivering projects quicker. And I think the idea is that when we come and we discuss the challenges and we hear the two-way dialogue, we come back with solutions. And that's to show that we're listening and we're delivering. And we're delivering things that make a difference. You're talking about 95% on time and those few percent. The goal is that if you're in the Northeast and you have 4 seasons, we're subject to a lot of things that other areas don't have. You have freezing temperatures, you got salt, you got a system that's exposed to the elements. And different challenges just because of the amount of people that we carry too, right? So throw that into the mix. But if we could take those incidents that occur and we can minimize the impacts, like, so for instance, it could be delayed and then it's 5.5 minutes late, it's considered late. But 5.5 minutes might be more amenable to the riders than a 2-hour delay. And those are the things that, how do you make those things not only fewer and farther apart, but you minimize and you improve your response to these incidents that do occur. And that is part of rebuilding the workforce. And I think demonstrating that we can continue to deliver important results sooner, that actually make a difference. And that's based on the feedback and the communication is how I really think that we are going to rebuild trust, we're going to rebuild ridership. And we're gonna continue to be a key part of a thriving economy. I think if we weren't able to do what we do today, a lot of the businesses that are here today wouldn't be able to be successful. And I want to assure everyone here that we're committed to doing even better. And we're gonna do that with results, not just me saying it. So this is just the beginning of the dialogue, Jim.
Great. Secretary, added thoughts on trust and confidence?
I mean, for me, it is just putting it out there. We don't shy away from, here's the congestion. Here are the delays we're seeing. Here's how this is trending over time. Here are the places where we have bridges that we've had to close. Here's why. Here's when we're going to be fixing them. I think the big thing is just own it. You can't take it personally. I think that's the other thing. People get really mad about their commute, and rightfully so. So I'm not taking that personally. I'm also not going to hide behind it, just say, well, it's not as bad as it, well, no, it is actually that bad because you're also experiencing that. You wanna know where your money's going. And that's the other part of just like, here's where your money's going, putting that out there. And every time we create one of these dashboards and put that data out there, that's building the trust and the transparency to, when things are going wrong, we're gonna tell you. When we think there's going to be a delay coming on a project, we're just gonna tell you. Because that's the only way that we can say to people, okay, we need more money, trust that we're actually gonna spend it correctly. And that's on whatever mode we're talking about. But I think that's what's gonna take to deal with a lot of, I think, the issues that we're dealing with, the scale of the issues we're dealing with. And I think also, when you do things like that, it makes it much easier for your elected officials to trust you. To go to the federal government and say, hey, they really need this. And also for the federal government to say, yes, absolutely, you need this. We're gonna give you this money because we know you're gonna deliver it. And I think Phil has also hit it on the head, also continuously outperforming ourselves, whether it's speed, whether it's reducing cost. When you do that, you start to build back that trust. And we are going to need a lot of trust if we have to continue through a lot of these really difficult projects.
Yeah, I think you both have hit it on the head, that I think what both the business community, the riding public, the taxpayers want is transparency, accountability, and results. That's what they're looking for. And with that will come the resources necessary to get where we all want to go on our transportation network. With that, we're at time. I want to ask you to join me in thanking Secretary Monica Tibbits-Nutt and General Manager Phillip Eng.